Now, the first principle I want to share here is the listening, questioning mindset principle, because it is such an important principle for the salesperson to understand. The first thing that I want to bring to your attention is most salespeople don't ask good questions because they don't pre-prepare the questions. And because of that, when they ask the question of the prospect will answer based on the question asked. If you ask a good question, you'll get a good answer. If you ask a mediocre question, you'll get a mediocre answer. It's that simple. Now, the other factor is most prospects will never volunteer what their wants or needs are. Even after good questioning, a lot still won't give you the answers that you want. So the way that this should work is your listening mindset should be vital in the way that you sell. So first up, you need to ask the appropriate question. Once you've asked an appropriate question, listen for the answer. Don't be like so many other people. You've asked the question. Now, while they're answering, in your mind, you're thinking about the next question you're about to ask. No, it doesn't work that way. Ask, listen intently. Once they've finished what they were saying, just pause for a second or two, just in case there's more that they want to say. And secondly, by pausing, you'll get more attention from them. When you ask the next question, use the same principle. When they've finished the answer, just pause, make sure that they have finished, and then keep on moving forward. Then, you need to do this over and over until you start getting to what we call an understanding of what they're talking about and what their wants and needs will be. You see, as you do this, and as you do it properly, the prospect, will you believe, will reveal how they want to be sold. That's right. They will actually reveal how they want to be sold. And sometimes by asking good questions, I've had people put the credit card on the table just asking when I can deliver what I've got. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen to you, but that is good questioning. And that's how important it is. So important, take one. Listen, question, and that then becomes a listening, questioning mindset. End of story. That's how the professional salespeople do it. And that's how you should do it as well. I purposely called this first principle the listening, questioning mindset principle. That's right. Look, just a quick reminder, we were all born with two ears and one mouth, and we should use them in that proportion. So many in sales haven't understood this or applied it. The professionals, the real professionals, would listen 80 to 90% of the time and only talk between 10 and 20% of the time. Now that's something that you need to develop over time. The other part of questioning is, in one industry, I worked there for 9 years, and the first thing that I did, based on everything else that I've done in the past, is to start writing out questions relative to that industry. And in fact, there were 3 different sectors in that industry that I would work to, and I had questions based in the A, the B, and the C category. Now, over a while, I wrote out more than 100 questions. I also had more than 100 comebacks. So all of this would roll off the tip of my tongue. It would be there, stored in my brain, ready to be used. And I would go back and re-rehearse them as often as I should and as often as I could. Now, the important thing here is I've also mentioned the value of the pause. That is so crucial, because if you pause, 2 things happen. One, the prospect may be wanting to say something else, so you haven't cut them off. You've given the courtesy of thinking, you've paused and allowed them to start sharing whatever they want with you. The other thing which is very important with the pause is it builds your credibility. So the more you learn to pause during the presentation, the more trust you'll develop, and the more trust you develop, the more likely you are to sell. Now, to round off this first principle, there's a lot I'd like to convey, But let me try and keep it short so that you can get to understand the most important things that you should be aware of. Firstly, in any presentation, there are 3 levels of messages. The first level is what the seller is wanting to say. The second level is what the seller thinks he or she is saying. And the third level is what the prospect thinks the seller is saying. Now, all of those could be a mile apart if you don't work at getting attention very early in the presentation. And the other thing that you should remember also is what you say accounts to about 7% of what the prospect takes in. The way you say it, on the other hand, takes in about 37% of what the prospect takes in, and their perception of what you say can be as high as 56%. So I know at which end I would like to have those percentages, because to me, 7% to 50% again are miles apart. Now, this is where the pause comes in importance in any presentation, because with the pause, you can actually create attention, you can build an atmosphere of communication, but most importantly, you start to build trust. And the more trust you build, the more the prospects take on ownership of the questions. And if you allow them to finish their questions, as said earlier on this video, they then start to build confidence. Now, prospects want to say more and more if you allow them to, if they start to trust you. And as they share, your ability to sell enhances dramatically. Having said all of that, now get to understand this one point, because it's so important. Most of us talk at around 80 to 125 words a minute. If I start talking at 150 words a minute, then people have to concentrate a lot more. In a lot of cases, it's not a subtle way of selling. And it's not a very communicative way of selling either. On the other hand, tertiary educated people read at about 250 to 300 words a minute, whereas those without tertiary education can generally mouth every word and are very slow at reading. So be appreciative when you present if you've got something to present that they need to read, because some can read far above what you're saying, and other people you don't actually need to slow the reading down so that they can perceive what you're getting to. But here's the most important part. Most people think at about 550 to 600 words a minute. So if you haven't got their attention early in the presentation and you don't use the pause to your advantage, guess what might happen? When your prospect's thinking at 550 or 600 words a minute, you may be thinking about young Jenny that should have done something at the reception earlier, but he now needs to correct. Or he may be thinking about the dry cleaning sitting on the back seat of the car that should have been delivered to the dry cleaners yesterday. Whatever it is, unless you have the prospect's attention, they could be one end of the scale and you could be at the other. Your presentation needs to keep attention as a valuable way in the way that you sell. So to do that, learn to understand the power of the pause. Now, I know I'm laboring this, but it's one of the most important things that you can learn in your presentation and in your selling as well. So take that on board. Learn to pause more often. How often should you pause? Well, you pause as often as necessary to make sure that both you and the prospect are on the one page.